What's up, everyone? This week we are returning to Standard and we're playing a little Temur Merge. This is an update of the deck that Michael Majors used to make top 8 of the Invitational last weekend, so congrats to him. He was convinced that his deck was broken. He put his money where his mouth is, and he was rewarded with a 4th place finish, I believe, so not too shabby. This is basically a cross between the deck that his team and Andrew Brown's team played at the Pro Tour and Owen's deck. So just kind of a mashup, bunch of different things going on. And Majors and I basically feel like this is the best version of that deck right now. Might be a better version that exists, but you know, we're always tweaking and tuning and stuff, so we might get there. But this deck is very similar to Owen's deck, except Majors is using the Primal Druids from his and Andrew's deck, and I think that's a pretty good upgrade. While Gather the Pack, being able to find Gnarlwood Dryad for like the kind of 1-mana removal spell thing is pretty cool. Primal Druid does ramp you to Emrakul, which Owen's squad figured out was very important, hence their use of Nissa's Pilgrimage. So Primal Druid is nice in that it is a great thing to sacrifice to emerge. It doesn't get dinged by Liliana like the Pilgrim's Eyes do. And because of Primal Druid, we have Wretched Gryff, which is something that allows you to emerge on turn 4. So you can actually curve Druid, indicate return into Wretched Gryff, and you have Traverse the Uvenwald to fix your mana, either finding the mountain or the island for the Gryff. So Druid is very nice. It is basically exactly what this deck wants to be doing. And it's really cool that this deck just does a bunch of like self-mill setup stuff in the early game. And you basically get to go like Primal Druid to stop the early aggression. You have Ishkana to kind of hold the ground in the mid game, and then you have these big fatties, Wretched Gryff, Elder Deep Fiend, and Emrakul to close the game with. So the natural progression of this deck is there. The other thing worth noting is the mana base. There are 11 forests, 4 Yavimaya. We have 15 green sources for our 8 green 1-drops. No ETB tap lands because the deck wants to use all of its mana every turn. And basically has like the bare minimum red source, the Singleton Mountain, to actually cast Kozilek's Return. And now that I'm thinking about it, I could kind of see actually just playing a Shivan Reef in this deck to traverse for potentially. But I think the mountain is fine. 3 islands is definitely the correct number. Like, you don't really want more than this. And when we were playing with 2, there were a few too many games where I would mill over it with Vessel or Gather the Pack, and then I won't be able to find my second island with Traverse or Primal Druid, which is kind of a beating. I guess like if you had Delirium, you could in theory get a Yavimaya, but it's still kind of painful. It was mostly Primal Druid was the big issue. Well, Primal Druid and Pilgrim's Eye both. But yeah, so that's about it for the main deck. I guess I should mention Shrine since it's kind of a big deal. But yeah, basically Owen had a 1 of Chandra in his deck, which made him have to play a bunch of red sources, and I like the Chandra as kind of the wild card for Delirium, where you could actually get up to 7 different card types, but you never really need that. Like, you don't necessarily need a 6-mana Emrakul, although it is possible. It is basically just like the Chandra was kind of filling in case you didn't hit an enchantment or didn't hit an artifact, and then you could still realistically get up to 6 different types. But Shrine kind of does the same thing in that it's another way to actually just like have 7 mana, be able to play an Emrakul for 8. If you only have 5 card types. So I really, really like the Shrines in the deck too, and they're kind of free because the mana as is good enough. You know, it's certainly not perfect, right? But it is definitely good enough to play some colorless lands, and Shrine is among the best of them. You could have Sanctum of Ugin, but I think it's more important to actually be able to cast Emrakul as cheaply as possible, so Shrine is doing good work there. As for the sideboard, kind of a mishmash. A lot of different cards coming from different strategies. Like Majors did not have the counterspells or the Jaces at the Invitational. The list that he sent me also did not have the Cokes. But I think the counterspells are pretty important against black decks. Just being able to like counter Planeswalkers and things that you can't actually deal with. Sometimes you might counter like an Infinite Obliteration or Transgress the Mind. Basically just like anything to keep them from like building a board presence. Liliana and Tireless Tracker are the 2 biggest threats to the deck, so Clash of Wills is there. Kalitas is also kind of annoying because it's pretty easy to get that over 5 toughness to survive a Flashback K return, and it shuts your Primal Druids off, you know, so pretty annoying. But yeah, the counterspells help there. Jace is just another additional threat. Lets you sift through kind of like your bad cards, maybe find gas or find lands, whatever you need. Allows you to discard K-Return, and it's just like a really, really cheap threat. So if they decide to just take out the majority of the removal, then Jace is actually going to punish them. And the one coax is for infinite obliteration and to a smaller extent transgress the mind, where you can find your Emrakul that has been exiled. One coax is probably not a great idea just to play by itself, but it basically just because you can't find it with like Vessel or Grapple or Gather the Pack, so you just kind of have to like luck into drawing it. But once you have Jace, you can just safely mill over it, and I think it has earned its slot at that point once you have Jace in your deck. Third Ishkana for decks like Bant and anything that you really need to just like hold the battlefield against, like anything that's like putting you under pressure. I think Ishkana is pretty good against. Nissa Vastwood Seer is kind of similar to Jace in that it gives you a different threat. Something that you can traverse for in the mid to late game on the cheap, help you hit your land drops, and transform into this Planeswalker that has also this card advantage engine, so that's pretty good. Noose Constrictor, good against Bant, good against humans, also very, very good against Fever Visions because you can just discard down to 3 cards, draw up to 4 off the Fever Visions, or rather discard down to 2, drop to 3 off the Fever Visions, not take the 2 damage, and actually just like pound them with the Noose Constrictors too, which is pretty nice. But most of the time this is just going to be a thing that can block that you can also sack to emerge if necessary. There's a Lashweed Lurker that is mainly there for Liliana. That's kind of the problematic card, just because that it comes down early. It kills your Pilgrim's Eyes. You don't really have a lot of good ways to actually get in to deal Liliana damage, and by the time that you're casting like Wretched Gryphs and Elder Deep Fiends, like that's when Liliana is going to start to tick up to 7 and actually threaten the ultimate, and the ultimate is certainly beatable, but it is very difficult to beat. So Lashweed Lurker is a thing that you can traverse for once their Liliana's on 7 and actually just reset it. And then the last card was my personal edition, basically just putting Evolutionary Leap in every green deck since ever. But yeah, Leap is just a card that makes it so against black decks, they can never really keep you down because you're always just going to chain into another threat, or even if you hit like a Primal Druid, you're going to get some value and find something off of that that is going to facilitate your game plan a little bit. And it basically just means that they can't grind you into the dust, which I really like. So the Leaps have been excellent. Definitely try those out. Definitely try the Shrines. Try the cleaner mana base. Try Primal Druid. I mean, I think everything that's going on in this deck is pretty good, but let's prove it. Let's get to the games.